A man getting bit by an alligator and he screams.
Okay, quiet. Hey, quiet.
Shoot out towards me.
Ow! No, not an owl. A real scream of pain.
Thank you all for joining us to talk about The Confession. It sounds like, Will, let me ask you real fast. How did the premiere go for you at DIFF?
I thought it was great. Yeah, so that was like the biggest screen that I've seen it on, you know, and like the biggest and certainly like the biggest space. Like when we're, you know, coloring it and mixing, like you're never coloring it, or unless you're like you know, Michael Bay or Spielberg, you're never like in a room that big for the mix. So yeah, so that like, it was so fun just to see it in that space. It was so fun. I think with these, like with Italia and Zachary and Scott, like to see it with them, you know, to kind of all be in the same space, because we haven't been together since we shot it. So I think all that was just, it was like, and being from Dallas, it was like a lot of worlds colliding. So yeah, I was kind of like, for me, it was kind of, I don't think it could have gone any better.
Great. That's great to hear. So I want to go ahead and jump into the film, and I want to ask how this project came about, specifically in terms of utilizing the Pied Piper story to get at things like socioeconomic strife and struggles with faith of all different kinds, and parenthood and generational trauma, etc.
Wow. Okay. So yeah. So the Pied Piper, I think that was just like an idea that I liked. I thought it was an interesting kind of like way to tie that in with the kids, and the Piper takes the kids away. I thought that was like a creepy, you know, kind of fairy tale and story, to kind of weave into like a modern kind of like horror film and a modern kind of like retelling. I thought there was something kind of interesting there, and I didn't think it had really been done before. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a creepy, weird story that we could do something with. And then I think like the other issues kind of you're talking about, the socioeconomic stuff, I think that kind of came as I was working on the script. Like I did, like I think everyone, I think I talk about maybe in the director's statement or somewhere, but everyone in the story has been abandoned in some way, you know. Italia's character has been abandoned, Scott's character.
I have to take you guys downstairs. I'm sorry, my computer's about to die.
No problem.
And I think, but like those ideas, like kind of like you're talking about, like I didn't set out at the beginning to say, I'm going to write a story where every character has been abandoned. You know, like those are the things that you sort of find in the process. And then a lot of writing, I feel like, is sort of like making these tangential kind of connections between characters, between themes, between different elements. And so I think that's kind of when those kind of, you know, kind of like you're talking about, the deeper kind of ideas and themes kind of emerge sort of just like through the process and like revising the story.
Yeah, great. I want to also ask the cast members, Zachary, Italia, and Scott, was this a kind of, was this film something that asked you to bring particular aspects of yourselves to the roles? Or was it kind of the opposite? Were these roles sort of, I think, far away from your own lived experiences?
Well, I think that my role, I mean, I kind of play kind of in a way a possessed character, so I don't think I exactly identify as a lot of my traits as very possessed. I hope not. But I think it made me need to think of like some new traits to bring to the table, such as maybe I mean, I don't think I'm normally very creepy, so maybe trying to be maybe a little bit more ominous, but also very childlike. Like as some things are said in the movie, I don't think I'm supposed to spoil anything. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be careful with spoilers.
Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, I'm not possessed in real life, so it made me need to bring some more things to the table, new traits, aspects.
I think for me, it was just kind of a version of myself in if that stuff were to happen to me. I definitely brought. I have a 5-year-old, so I, reacted to a lot of the maternal dilemmas that she Naomi experiences in the film, and then especially sort of the resistance to the religion of it all. I feel like I grew up raised Roman Catholic, but I had a lot of questions, and I think that I just was able to ground everything in sort of my own reactions to that stuff being the only option that made any kind of possible sense. Even still saying it, it's hard. And so I think that made it easier for me to handle the story.
For me, the suspension of disbelief was really fun. That's something I always enjoy. I don't know, surrounding myself, and that's sort of the world of acting at its core. The parental aspect, like Italia was saying, was probably the most innate thing that I brought, just because I have kids, and so that aspect wouldn't be informed at all prior to having kids, to the extent that it does once you do have kids. So that changed it. But other than that, I generally try to remove characters that I do as far from myself as possible, but there's always going to be underlying elements like that.
Yeah. And then, Jason, you had a question about the Pied Piper with the roles as well, correct?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on I love this idea of, but first off, for the Pied Piper piece, nice.
Well, what a reveal.
That's great.
My buddy has a daughter, so there you go.
Those are your toys. Don't lie. You brought them with you.
Can't comment on that. Sorry. Okay, so Pied Piper.
Yeah, no. I wanted to touch on a little bit about this aspect, which I don't think you really see. No, you're fine. This idea that Scott has a line in the film of, and I'm paraphrasing, but just because God does something doesn't mean he's on your side. And I don't think we've seen that aspect of humanity dealing with being on the other side of what God's intent may be. Was there, I guess, tell me your thought process in regarding that, that angle, and then kind of how you balance the religious aspects of this movie versus the horror aspects of this film.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great question. I've actually been hoping that someone would bring this up. Yeah, I mean, I think I grew up in the church, and I grew up surrounded, all my all my family, my uncle was a pastor, my parents, really involved in church, and so I've been around religion, especially in this in the South, my whole life, in Texas my whole life, and it's sort of it's kind of the thing of if there is a God and God exists, then it does God intervene to stop bad things from happening? Does God choose to let certain bad things happen, but not other bad things happen? How do you explain, these horrible tragedies? And we can all think of the worst sort of crimes of, the last, whatever, hundreds of years. And it's sort of how do those things happen if God can stop them from happening? And so I just thought that was interesting. And that's kind of how the sort of that line that you're talking about, I think it was kind of grappling with that a little bit. And then, Scott and Italia's characters Italia's character used to be a person of faith. Scott's character was the opposite, didn't. And now when they meet, they've switched, and they have this kind of conversation where a lot of this comes out, where they say, they've kind of each had their conversion to go the opposite way. And they each kind of posit an idea of sort of like the nature of God. And they're kind of coming at it, from different places now. And then as the story goes on, they kind of evolve again, which was kind of, fun. And to me, it was like, as a person who's kind of been around faith and thought about faith like my whole life, it was a way to kind of inject these ideas into a story and make it like personal for me in a way that I thought was interesting. And like we talked about this a little bit at the Q&A. It was sort of like, would I have a chance to get those ideas into another movie again soon, and so I was like, well, maybe I will, maybe I wouldn't, but I think they're pretty specific ideas. So let's kind of go for it. And in a way, that's kind of like, those are really kind of like the themes of the movie and what the movie's about, is like these, the strange coincidences idea. I just really loved that. That's when I would describe my faith when I was really young. That's how I would describe it. And so it's sort of like, okay, well, if all these things line up perfectly, when good things happen, and we're going to give God credit for that, then if bad things line up perfectly too, is that God too? Like, that's what Italia's character says. So those are just interesting ideas for me. Those are things I hadn't really seen. And I thought would be kind of cool. Like, just kind of like cool to kind of fertilize the story with, for lack of a better kind of way to put it.
Right. You hear the Noah story from Noah's perspective all the time, right? You don't hear it from the people on the ground that had to deal with the flood on the other side of it, right?
Yeah, the people who are like drowning. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I mean, this is something that I think appreciate about the film, was that it does raise questions of faith. It does raise questions of spirituality, but not necessarily about religiosity. So that aspect is never kind of hitting us over the head. It's not necessarily telling us how we should or how we shouldn't behave, but rather raising questions, right? Provoking thought, right? To kind of, I think, examine our own faith. And when I say faith, I don't even necessarily mean just religious faith, but I think faith in anything, faith in institutions, right? We see Italia's character, right, not really have faith in the detective that shows up at the door. We question, does Zachary's character still have faith in kind of the world around him in terms of his friends and school? Right? I mean, so it kind of just spirals out from there, but of course, like starts with this idea, I think, of faith in whatever God we ascribe to.
Yeah, I think so, and I think too a lot more people have those notions of faith than like necessarily subscribe to, like you're saying, a specific sort of brand of it, So I think that kind of like is a broader, hopefully a broader thing that a lot of people will kind of relate to. Like you're saying, with the certain institutions, certain, especially religious. So
something else, and I think this is a question for all of you. Something else that this film makes me think about or brings up is questions about responsibility, about what we owe to each other, or even how we should look after one another. So how do you guys see this film as being kind of in conversation with our current lived reality?
I think Scott should take that one.
No, well, okay. In my character's instance, so he's old high school friends with Naomi. So what responsibility does he have to come through and help her? And then after it's revealed what, the intensity of what he's helping her with, does he still have to continue? And it's funny, Italia and I sort of butted heads on set about what we thought our relationships were going to be. Whereas when I read it, I was like, oh, they hooked up in school. And she was like, they definitely did not hook up in school. And I kind of think that was perfect because I kept what I thought the entire movie and she kept what she thought. And that's probably what it was. That's probably what the situation was that I was in love with her and she was not in love with me. So, yeah, when you have that sort of dynamic of characters, what do you owe the person? I'm of the mindset that you should always be there for the ones you love. Thick and thin. Yeah, it's a pretty tumultuous world out there currently, I guess, politically and everything else, where we're not seeing so much of that Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I think too that it, your character didn't have to help me. Harling didn't have to help. I think it also is sort of a reflection on not needing to believe the same thing to do what's right, which I think is kind of polarized right now in our current climate.
Yeah, that wasn't even necessarily a political question. It was just, I mean, I think this is something that I think about just a lot going through kind of every day is what do I need to consider about my actions and how they might affect someone else, even if that's just in line at the grocery store, right? Or even if that's just driving to work, right? To not kind of like lose my mind and yell at someone in traffic, right? How do we kind of, I think, take care with one another? And I think that's something that this film, touches on with how, Italia, like you said, how these other characters don't have to be there to help Dylan and Naomi, right? But they do, right? Harlan doesn't have to drive through the night to get there to come in and scare the entity in the house, right? But they do, and I think that, and even the daughter of I cannot remember I can't remember the character's name now. Cobb, was it?
Cobb.
Royce
Yes,
Cobb,
right,
yeah.
Even she comes to lend, support to try to remove a curse, and I think so. I think this film really does touch on how community matters, right? Even if it's just a tangential community.
I think too, it's more about being open-minded to everybody's perspective, because at the beginning, Grayson is helping bring her in, answer logical questions, because that's sort of the road that Naomi is traveling down. And once that is kind of exhausted in a dead end, then she opens her mind a little bit more to his way of thinking, because there's really no other choice for her in that time. And I think that Llewellyn's character, even though she does come back to try and break that curse, I don't think it's for Naomi. I think that's for her and her family and her dad and what she was doing. But it was, it was the fact that everybody was open and nobody was like, you're insane, I'm not listening to you, that they were able to figure out what was going on. And I think if we were able to do that more in real life, instead of, saying, this is what I believe and this is where I stand, and I'm not moving, then if everybody had a little bit more malleability in not just what they believe, like, believe what you believe and have conviction there, but still be able to appreciate what other people do. And, the more open you are to try and understanding their perspective, the more, developed you're going to be as a human.
I think it's all, in the real world and in the film, it's all fueled by empathy, different levels of empathy. And I think as you get a little older, you just sort of accumulate more empathy, more ammunition of empathy, and you're able to apply it more because you've been hurt by different things. So you feel for people in different ways that you may not have when you're younger. And if you're young and you have that level of empathy, I think that's actually pretty special.
Except for the principal in the movie. The principal was a dick, and he sucked. And
Yes.
I don't care about him.
No.
Well, we can all agree that Ted Nugent still should be cursed, right? We're still on that page?
I don't know. Some people disagree, but it's one of the things I was going to say. You guys may find this interesting, but I think it's sort of like in terms of like the empathy and helping people and stuff. When we originally wrote this, or when we wrote the script, when I wrote the script, before when we went into production, Harling's character, the guy who shows up at the house to help, at the end, he talked more even about sort of being open, and he talked more about like it's sort of like I think it's the Buddhist story about like we're all feeling different parts of the same elephant. I describe it this way, you describe it this way, but we're all feeling like he had more of that in him, and he sort of talked about it more and kind of talked about it sort of like just a more kind of like universal idea. And then when we had to for budgetary reasons and for scheduling, we had to change that, and we had to cut some scenes out, and that's one of the things that I think I wish that idea was in there a little bit more, because I think because I really do like that idea. of everybody kind of helping each other out. And I don't know that I even, as we were working on it, I don't even really think I was that cognizant of that part of the movie, of everybody kind of coming to help her. But sort of like now that we're here and talking about, I'm glad that it's in there. I think that's kind of a cool thing.
That's the great thing about this, is that we can all take something, I think, different away from it, right? Or different aspects of the film kind of shine through for different viewers. Yeah.
Scott, I know you've worked with Will before, but how, Italia and Zachary, how did you guys come to meet Will and come to this film?
Well,
I kidnapped his child and told him if he didn't give me the role, I wouldn't return them.
Seems fair.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
yeah.
effective at least.
And then she told Zach to do the same thing, and Zach did it. It got really weird.
2 kids, 2 roles.
This just happened. It's happened again.
yeah. I mean, I auditioned for the role, but yeah. I auditioned.
No kidnapping required.
No kidnapping.
I was sent the script and was asked to read it for interest, and I did, and I thought it was interesting. And then I watched Brotherhood by Will and was like, I want to be in business with this man. He knows how to tell a story. And so we met over Zoom and hated each other immediately, and it was off to the races.
Yeah. That tracks too. So.
I was like, she's like, I hate this guy. Let's go make a movie together.
Let's go.
Is perfect.
And go to Dallas.
So, Will, in regards to kind of horror and franchise terms, is the Pied Piper something you can see extenuating past The Confession? Is this something that a story that, because I do think that there's areas for the Pied Piper to exist outside of just this story. Is there anything that you?
I would love to. And if anyone's listening, call me. Honestly, like, no, I totally do. And, there are things that, like, it was kind of funny so I talked about this a little bit at the premiere, but like a buddy and I like sat down, we were literally on a road trip. We sat down at a Panera Bread in 2018 and we sort of sketched out like, this is how this movie's going to get made. This is how we're going to finance it. And we almost had like these almost like Dogma 95 rules for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, because it was like, man, if you write a movie that's going to cost $10 million, like, okay, you can do that. But like, the landing strip for that is so narrow. So it was very like, we set it, I set it out like a plan and wrote to those specifications, and it was like, let's keep it contained. Let's find a way to make it really visually interesting, but also contained. And part of that was a certain way that like the scares are going to happen and the scares are going to unfold. And I think because of that, without giving too much away, because of that, I do think, like to your point, Jason, I do think there is some more room for, that idea, and that character. So.
When you first sent me sort of the log line, and it was about the Pied Piper, that's what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be him going on a murdering spree, and that was going to be the main point of the plot. But it turned out to be much more.
Well, I think it also lends itself to expansion because of how well Will told sort of the idea that the evil transfers and that it can be, depending on your proximity, how much of it you can absorb and sort of, and then, with the ending scene that I won't ruin, take your pick.
Yeah. I mean, I see it as a whole saga. I could see that it could become an entire saga because the entire concept is very unique and it has an entire arc and like in the entire way that it like functions and pulls you in based on, as you said, like the proximity that you are to evil. Like it makes it really, it makes like a really interesting thing. Like I could see that very much so expanded in the future.
And the film does kind of end on an elliptical note. I mean, not to get too much into the end, but I love the ending of this film. I mean, I think it really, again, how do I talk about this without like giving too much away? But I like how it subverts, right? certain things. So I thought that was really smart, really well done.
Thank you.
And a little known fact: Stephen King does all of his writing at Panera.
That's why I chose it.
Only the finest come from Panera.
Yeah.
That's right. Get a bread bowl and just go to work.
It's where all modern day horror originates.
If you need recommendations, like it's like my instance, I've been there even more. If it's possible to even be there anymore, then I've been there more.
You should see the rights of Pinkberry.
But I think with the ending, like, well, you're always trying to kind of subvert expectations, like, and I feel like I have a good friend of mine who's a writer, and we always talk about like like you're trying to come up with like the happiest sad ending or like the saddest happy ending, like you're just trying to like give people something that's satisfying, but like not in a way that they expect it, come in a different way. So with this, it was something that I got excited about because I felt like I think this will be if we're able to line it up and pull it off, because you have to line it up first. But if we can do that, I think it'll be satisfying for people, and I don't think they'll see it coming. Which,
by the way, Will, I'm only now realizing that's sort of a signature of yours now in the films you've done.
Dun dun dun.
There you go.
So what's next, Will? What's next for the confession?
We think it's gonna come out later this year. We haven't announced it yet, but we think it's gonna come out later this year for people to see it. And at non-festivals for people to see it. And then we're hoping that we're gonna do some more festivals and give people kind of a chance to see it like on the big screen close to them. And like that whole process is just so fun. So I think all the four of us would love to kind of be at as many festivals with it as we can.
And then Italia, Scott, and Zachary, what's next for you guys?
I will be cooking dinner. I did, actually, it's a movie that's doing its little festival circuit right now called Race Walkers. It's a sports comedy about Olympic speed walking. And my husband is in it as well. We produced it and shot it in Canada, and it premiered at Slam Dance in LA. And now it's doing the circuit. So that's probably what will come out shortly after this, maybe. I don't know yet. I'm not allowed to say any more than that. But it's ridiculous and it's funny, and my husband plays the most perfect douchebag, and it's lovely.
That sounds awesome.
I've seen it. It's hilarious. It's very
Will came to the premiere.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, for me, it's just back to auditioning. So, and also, and also, I do have an upcoming film that I'm in. It's called See Me. But I mean, I there's no precise date on when it's coming out, but
it's called See Me?
Sorry.
See Me?
Yeah, See Me. That's what it's. Yeah. It's coming out, I believe, in like fall area of like 2025, this fall. So yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
I'm supposed to shoot something called Tempest later this year. I don't know when. It's gotten pushed a couple times.
Very cool. Excited about all those things.
Jason,
No. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for accommodating us after the fest, and we really do appreciate it. This has been wonderful, and it's been so much fun talking to you guys. So thank you so much, and congratulations on the film. I think you guys are all wonderful in it, and it's a really, really cool, scary story, and I think it's a really unique take on a lot of themes. So I'm excited to tell people about it when it does, and when we can watch it with the bigger crowd.
Yeah. Zachary,
thank you.
Scott, Will, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Y'all have a great one.
Take care. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you like today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,